Malachy, how did you get involved in the sport of rugby?
I grew up in Limerick, which to the uninitiated is in Ireland, and it has a great tradition of rugby. There are many about 8 or 9 senior rugby teams and junior rugby teams and minor rugby teams. But I think it has surpassed religion as a guiding force in people's lives. And so when I was growing up, there were teams which were working class people. Now, most teams in Ireland were associated with universities and colleges, as they were here. But for the working class to be playing rugby was a sort of an anomaly of sorts. And the team that my family traditionally played for was a team called Young Munsters. And if you strayed from that, it was like you had left the church and become a Hindu or something. I got involved in rugby when a friend of mine, Ger South, who played for a team called Bohemians, asked me if I would join up with them. So at the age of about 14, 15, I did. And what was interesting about this is Bohemians were traditionally non-Catholics. And so to join up with them was like leaving the church. And people say, Jesus, you're going to play with them Protestants. You'll lose your immortal soul and all of that. But at the same time, there it was, they were still playing rugby. And I joined Bohemians, and that's how I got involved. I never did play what they call senior rugby over there because I left before I was good enough to play senior rugby and came back to America where I was born. Mm-hmm. But it imbued me with a sense of comradeship and with sportsmanship and the joy of sweat and learning the songs and the traditions and just sort of the decency of the whole thing. It was a very decent sporting thing, is rugby.
Yeah, I agree. Even though it has the reputation of being somewhat brutal, the sport itself, but you're on the field and you're ready to bite somebody's ear off, but right after that you're having a beer. So
right.
Yeah, I agree, and it's a joyful experience. So tell me how you, when you came back to America, how you picked up the sport again here in the States.
When I was about 16 or so, 15, not quite 16, like a lot of the Irish, there was no work in Ireland, so I went to England and I went to work in various factories over there, and I played for the various factory teams. And then when I was in the US, I came back to the US, and after a while, I saw a little squib in the paper about the New York Rugby Football Club, NYRFC, and I had a hell of a job finding out who they were, where they played, what they did. But a lot of tenacity and getting to the British consulate actually got me in touch with this group of guys. And they were mostly Brits, and they were very la-di-da, It was very difficult to understand what they were saying was there. And they went on and on about the game, and they had an annual dinner where they did toast the President of the United States, and then they also toasted the Queen, God bless her. And so I once proposed a toast to the President of Ireland, and it was as if I suggested that they should have sexual intercourse with a rat or something. It was like, good heavens, what's that all about? And so on. And but anyway, they were a pretty good crowd, even though they had that sort of, a lot of where we are in the, they thought that the US was still a colony and behaved accordingly, that the natives were unreliable, untruthful, and so forth. But so I played with the New York Rugby Club for a good number of years. And one year, a group, there were some elections, and we did not agree, a group of us did not agree with democracy, because their idea of democracy, that all the officers of the club were going to be Brits. So a group of us stalked out, 5 of us, and off we went to a bar, Jimmy Glennon's on 3rd Avenue. It was in 1960, and we decided we'd form our own club. So New York Rugby Club, and we decided, well, the name of our club was going to be the Manhattan Rugby Football Club. And for years New York wouldn't play us. They decided we were a paper club. But anyway, we did eventually get to play and become a strong entity on our own, until some time ago, Manhattan and New York got married. And so all the guys were integrated into they went back home, shall we say. Mm-hmm. But that's all it's all changed now, of course. Mm-hmm. And so that was my New York playing days.
It's interesting. Yeah, I didn't know that you were involved in the origins of Manhattan.
I was the first president of the Manhattan Club.
Wow. Ray Cornbill, was he? He was Manhattan, wasn't he?
Ray Cornbill, yes, the coach for the Eagles was a Manhattan player. Yeah.
I remember him. Now, let's jump ahead to Fairfield University. The 1963 was their opening year, and many of the members of that team speak very fondly of you. They remember you quite clearly. Do you remember them at all?
I remember Fairfield very well in 1963. I had to head up there. I even forget how I got there. I'm not sure that I drove or took a train or what. But it sure as hell was not convenient. And I'm not sure if there was a very steep field. And yeah, and it was like I was just saying, these lads should be in the Himalayas, because they had to climb that hill and the wind was against them and all that. But what was interesting to me about refereeing with Fairfield, now there were other new clubs around, and there's the American tradition is that winning is all important in so many arenas. And people would do anything to win, including disabling the other side. And but in rugby, which is not understood, you see, in most games there are rules, and traditions and regulations. But rugby is probably the only sporting thing that has laws. They are the laws of rugby. And the referee is he is the judge of who has violated the law. So both teams are potential defendants. And he is going to be, or he, usually it is a he, but that's changed now these days. And so, and then there's a tradition also here of being able to be somewhat abusive to umpires and referees and all of that. And in rugby, traditionally, counsel for the defense is the captain of each team, and only the captain is allowed to speak to the referee. That is an old, it's not a law, not one of the laws, but it's one of the old traditions. But it was constantly being violated by new people who thought that rugby football was like American football, and where yardage was extremely important, whereas in rugby football it is not all that important. And also you don't attempt to disable the opponents. And there were abuses, I say, of verbal abuse of referees and so forth. And I had refereed other games where it just, the torrents of abuse the people reflecting on your parentage or lack of it and so forth, and where you should go back to and where you ought not to be and so forth. But I do remember refereeing the Fairfield game. And I remember those lads were so eager to learn and to be taught and to follow the laws. So it was a most, and I'm not saying this because I'm doing this piece right now, Chris, but I'm saying it because it's the absolute truth. They were so respectful, and they understood. There seemed to be an integrated delight at being playing the game, because rugby is a sporting event. It's not a bloody war to the end. It is not about savagery, and it's really not essentially about winning at any cost. Winning is fine, and one should attempt to score more than the other team does. But those lads got the spirit and the delight, and that's the way rugby should be. There should be a great delight, and you play as best as you can. You tackle like you're a bull in heat and bring down everything in sight. Many times people brought down their own people. They got so excited. But and that's the beauty. That's the beauty of the game. And so I remember that, and I had a great delight in being a referee, and it was good. And even, kids making mistakes and so forth, holding on to the ball when you shouldn't in the scrum. And the thing, of course, it's very hard for young Americans is to get used to the fact that a forward pass is against the law. Lateral or back. That's it, kid. You can't, no matter what, much as you would like to, and much as you grew up in the American football tradition, it's back there, kiddo. So getting used to that whole idea, and then a crash tackling is not allowed, and it's, as I said, bad abuse of the ref is also out of order.
It's really good to hear that you thought so highly of the guys when they were starting out. Thinking back, I agree. I was very proud of the way we comported ourselves on the field, especially sometimes compared with the other people. Hopefully, they found out, the better way to go. But I think Fairfield has had a good tradition the rugby spirit.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that you helped instill that, I think, according to a lot of the guys that I've been hearing. So now, a couple of them said that you had invited them back to celebrate, in the rugby tradition, and thus they also gained an education in the other part of the sport, the camaraderie and the coming together. Is that a memory of yours?
Oh yes,
Yeah.
yes, I do. Well, um, part of the tradition, of course, is that that you applaud your
Right.
opponents off the field,
Mhm.
and that whatever has gone down, there could have been sharp words or angry words during the game. Of course, we're all human, and needless to say, that does happen. But that is, you applaud and shake hands with your opposite number, and then you go and if you are a drinker, and which I was the best chug-a-lugger in America, actually. Nobody ever defeated me, but I gave that up for the sake of the wife and the kidneys. But so yes, I do remember going with the lads after the game, and most of us over the years in rugby had some kind of a song or another. Now, most people say, I can't sing, and but everybody can sing, and everybody can recite, everybody can remember something, some kind of a performance. And so we had those songs. A lot of them were extremely bawdy. They were in the more of the bawdy limerick tradition, and which would be highly offensive, I suppose, to some people. But we had, if I were the rugby kind, which thank the Lord I'm not, sir, the kind of man that I would wed would be a rugby goalpost, for he'd stop balls, I'd stop balls, or we'd all stop balls together. We'd be all night in the middle of the night, stopping balls together. If I were the rugby kind, which thank the Lord I'm not, sir, the kind of man that I would wed would be a rugby scrum half, for he'd put it in, I'd put it in, we'd all put it in together. We'd be all night in the middle of the night, putting it in together. And then, of course, you go through the whole, somebody would get it back, he'd get it back, and I'd get it back. He'd pass it out, I'd pass it out, and so forth and so on.
It's good stuff. Yeah, yeah. Well, that's wonderful. It's going to be. They're going to love hearing your take on the early history, and as well as your take on the sport as well. Let me ask you. I still want to ask you about the essence of the rugby experience, but which you've touched on in a number of ways. But what advice would you have for young United States, and I'm making a distinction because in many countries it's just an automatic, like, we play baseball, but what about young people from the United States that might be contemplating taking up the sport, both young men and young women?
The great advantage of rugby football is that you don't have to be a giant or behemoth or anything like that. Any size, any sex can play. And you gain, when you get on a field with 14 other people who are looking to achieve the same thing as you, and you have an hour and a half of that, it is the greatest feeling in the world that you're moving, you have a goal, if only for a moment. And it helps you, it gives you a coherent thought. That's one thing. And the other thing is that it is a thoroughly and absolutely delightful and joyful experience. And you have more laughter, more comradeship, and more lovingship. You have brotherhood, sisterhood now, and all kinds of neighborhood and all kinds of hoods. And you can, and the great thing about rugby, it's an international game. And so wherever you go in the world, you'll find rugby. And the thing to do is once you've played it and got the rudiments of the game, and you go elsewhere, whether to Ireland or Australia or New Zealand, South Africa, England, Scotland, Wales, France, Italy, Romania, Haiti, Tahiti, China, Hong Kong, you'll find rugby. And that gives you an immediate entree into a certain society. And you have people who have, you can discuss, talk about, and you can go and play. And you have friends all over the world. That's one great thing about rugby, along with all the other stuff that goes, the fitness and the health things that go with it, the coordination of your body and good thinking. It does that for you as well. I'm not sure if I make myself clear about that, but the philosophy of it, and I don't want to get too serious about it because, you know, it's a ball game, and that's what it ought to be. And life is the same thing. So you might as well use it as a metaphor and have fun. And if you have no religion, you can also be a rugby player, you see.
Beautiful. That is perfect. Perfectly said.
The essence of it, as far as I'm concerned anyway, was that the joy of life and the release of whatever lunacy I had lurking in there, whatever madness was in my heart, I was able to let it all out on the field and not get arrested for murder.
You told me that you saw the movie Invictus, and I think that movie showed us how sport can be such a unifying force for good in the world, and I think you already made a lot of good comments on that. What did you think of that movie or that story?
I thought, yes, indeed, that movie did change a lot of people's thinking, change a lot of people's minds. What is interesting to me and to another aspect of the thing about the bringing together, Ireland, which is a country divided, ostensibly with Catholic South and Protestant North, is the only sport, rugby is the only sport that encompasses a national team from the North and from the South. All the other teams are Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. They are separated. So Protestant North and Catholic South are united by rugby. And when those guys get on the field and they're all wearing that green jersey of Ireland, they're all Irishmen. But more importantly, they are all rugby players. And that in itself is a most unifying, and it has brought together the blacks and the whites in South Africa. New Zealand has never had a problem with the folks, the Maoris there. They always do their dances and everything else. They've always had that. And in South Africa, let me put a blessing on you, Fairfield Rugby Football Club, on all your craniums that are alive still from those days, and to those who have died. But congratulations on hitting the 50 mark, and may your next 50 years be as fruitful and joyful, delightful, and as sporting as the last 50 years. And don't forget, just play the game.